But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it.
It is the show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies-infested hen house.
And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last week.
Yeah, they have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement?
It all started with a lawsuit so massive, it felt like a punch straight to the face of daytime TV. Charlie Kirk, the conservative fire starter and founder of Turning Point USA, didn't just call out The View, went straight for their throats. A lawsuit worth $100 million. Not for clout, not for headlines, because according to him, they crossed the line hard.
The culture shift between right and left authoritarianism, and now people don't recognize that if you just stop looking at it in terms of red and blue, look at the actions, whether it's war, suppression of free speech, pharmacological interventions that are mandatory, right, whatever it is, that used to all be associated with the authoritative right, the authoritarian right, and now those things are being embraced by the left. And I just think it's just an ideology thing, and I think we get confused and we think we're on the right side, and if it's our side that's saying this, for sure that's the right thing to do, and no one's critically thinking about this.
Joe Rogan is the gateway drug for young men that thought they were Democrats to become MAGA. Joe Rogan is the bridge, and on that bridge they'll see RFK, they'll see Elon Musk.
Here's what happened. During one of their typical heated episodes, the hosts of The View made comments that allegedly linked Kirk's Youth Samhita gathering of over 5,000 high school and college students to neo-extremist groups. Think about that. Thousands of teenagers, many just 16 or 17, flying across the country to attend a political event, and suddenly they're being smeared on national television as potentially linked to hate groups. Kirk, who's no stranger to criticism himself, said enough was enough. He might be a public figure, he can take the punches, but this wasn't about him. This was about teenagers who now have their names and faces forever linked to something that could haunt them for the rest of their lives. And the only thing that seemed to push The View to apologize? A legal threat.
Charlie Kirk's the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So, Charlie, do you accept The View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis.
But that apology wasn't the end. Kirk made it clear they're still talking to top-tier lawyers, and they're not dropping this. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories like this one. Now, let's continue.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president. Right.
Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men and allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
Now, here's where it gets even crazier. The only reason The View even considered apologizing wasn't guilt or regret, it was fear. Fear of a courtroom. According to Kirk, they had to threaten legal action just to get the show to admit they might have gone too far. And even with that, he's not letting it go. Why? Because, in his words, you can't just smear thousands of kids on national television and walk away like it never happened. Let's be real. 5,000 students from across the country chose to spend their summer weekend listening to conservative speakers. That's not your typical party crowd. Flights were expensive. Gas was sky high. Yet, they still showed up. So, why would The View try to tear it down? Kirk has a theory.
I have no hate for Joy Behar. If I saw her, I'd give her a hug. I'd probably say the same thing about me if I was her. You're worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is fucking great, and Joe Rogan believes in dragons!
If The View actually told their audience the truth, that thousands of young people traveled across the country to hear conservative voices, maybe their loyal viewers would start to question a few things. Maybe they'd wonder, why are so many Gen Z kids curious about these ideas? And that's exactly what the show couldn't allow. So instead of discussing it honestly, they reached for the easiest weapon, the smear. Kirk even joked they should hire the same legal team that won the Covington Catholic school case, which led to a massive $200 million settlement. He's not just fighting for his reputation, he's aiming to make an example out of The View. This isn't just some Twitter beef. This is courtroom warfare. And just when you thought daytime TV couldn't get any more dramatic boom, Joe Rogan enters the chat.
But with that show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in. You know, and they always bring on a token conservative woman, and they yell over her and silence her. And, you know, they did that with Meghan McCain, and they did that with what is that other blonde woman from Survivor? Do you remember her? Jamie, she was always yelling. I mean, it's a bizarre show. I think the way before you start, I think the way you described it is brilliant, and the way we should all look at it. Of course, you're going to see race. The idea of being colorblind is ridiculous, but treat everybody. They're just human beings. Everybody's just individuals.
Forget polite debates and quiet disapproval. Rogan didn't just weigh in; he came in swinging. No filter, no fluff. Just raw, sarcastic takedowns aimed straight at The View and especially Sunny Hostin. And trust me, it wasn't pretty. Rogan called out the absurdity of the whole thing. A $100 million lawsuit isn't a publicity stunt, it's a bombshell. That kind of money isn't oops, we misspoke territory. That's someone seriously messed up territory. And Rogan, with his usual mix of mockery and brutal logic, shredded the show for how recklessly they handled the situation. He didn't stop at the lawsuit. He zeroed in on the deeper problem: how The View operates like a chaotic mess of shouting matches, where facts are optional and hot takes are currency. Rogan compared their commentary to a doctor giving diagnoses based on horoscopes.
It's a very strange show, but it's fun to watch. It's just fun to watch them.
It's good entertainment.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly.
Well, they're just, you know, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
You know, that's sort of, I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, who are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart but captured.
Sure, I think she came into it with an agenda.
Of course.
You know.
They do everything with an agenda.
It was that bad. And Sunny? She wasn't spared for a second. According to Rogan, for someone with a legal background, her behavior was not just ironic, it was dangerous. She's supposed to know how words can become weapons in court. But instead of bringing careful analysis, she brought gasoline to a fire and struck the match. That's when the internet really started paying attention. It wasn't just about what The View said anymore. It was about how one viral takedown started flipping the entire narrative. Joe Rogan didn't just critique The View way, went straight for the jugular. And right at the center of it all was Sunny Hostin, the legal mind on the panel. The person who was supposed to know better, But instead of delivering thoughtful, fact-checked commentary, Sunny unleashed a rant that made waves for all the wrong reasons. She went off about uneducated white women voting for Trump, tossed out sweeping generalizations about race and politics, and suggested that people without college degrees lacked understanding. It was elitism at its worst, broadcasted live on national television.
I had to read the thing about The View because I just thought it was funny.
What's
That's
the
the only reason why I read that about me.
Dragon lover.
The radio,
All right, tell me
Joy
what this
Behar
is.
was trying to say that I believe in dragons.
Wait, what is this? I just
She
heard
said,
about
I
it.
checked it. I checked it. And the lady goes, did you double check this? She goes, I checked it. He believes in dragons.
Should be like
you think they lived
Sasquatch,
alongside of
bitch.
people?
Wait,
It was from a wildlife biologist who came on my podcast. It was from Forrest Gallant. Gallant? How do I say his last name? Great guy. I love him.
Yeah.
He's awesome. But
Rocky
he
and
was
Jamie.
saying,
And that's when Rogan pounced. He dismantled her talking points like a wrecking ball through drywall. He pointed out how absolutely ridiculous it is to equate college degrees with wisdom. As he put it, just because you go to college and memorize whatever they're teaching, whether it's economics or gender studies, doesn't automatically mean you're smarter or more capable of thinking critically. Sunny's comments weren't just offensive, they were reckless. Especially when she followed them up by saying The View is backed by ABC News, so viewers should trust their facts over Rogan's podcast. That, right there, was her fatal mistake. Because Rogan used that exact moment to flip the script. He laughed off the idea of her being a credible source, especially when her fact-checked claims included accusing him of believing in dragons. Seriously, dragons? The wild part? That misquote came from a podcast where he interviewed a wildlife biologist? But Sunny didn't care. She ran with the soundbite.
this is the most important part. This is right after she was saying, we are run by ABC News. You should trust us, not Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons. So she by saying we should trust them because they're double checked by ABC News, and then making the stupidest fucking statement. Like you didn't listen to what I said.
Yeah.
You didn't listen to what the wildlife biologist, and that's only a part of what he said.
I can't
the
believe
other
Joy
part of what he
Behar
said
didn't
was
weigh.
there was something before that where he was explaining encounters with giant reptiles. And then there's also, listen,
It doesn't make sense to me that a middle-aged woman could be dumb.
when you're worried about losing your job and you're worried about podcasts taking over and who's the source of news.
And that's when the tide truly began to turn. Rogan wasn't just laughing at the dragon Kamantha was fuming. Not because it hurt his reputation, but because it showed exactly how careless The View had become. Think about it. A daytime TV show backed by a major network, claiming they double-check everything, yet they couldn't even get a basic podcast quote, right? He replayed the moment with the wildlife biologist, where the topic of mythical creatures came up in passing clearly, as part of a casual, curious conversation. Nothing about believing in fire-breathing beasts hiding in your backyard. But that didn't stop Sunny Hostin from twisting it into something that made Rogan sound like a lunatic. On national TV, that's when Joe went into full demolition mode. He didn't need a studio audience or a camera, crew, just a mic and his raw, unfiltered honesty. He tore apart The View's logic, or lack of it, calling out how a show that claims to inform the public was acting like a reckless rumor mill, tossing around serious accusations without evidence, throwing words like neo-extremist and uneducated like confetti at a parade they weren't invited to.
Not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen audiences before for TV shows, but a lot of them are paid. They're paid to be there. So, because they have to guarantee that there's going to be people there. So there's services that you hire. And when a show gets really, really popular, you know, like Letterman or something like that, obviously it has its own fan base.
Right.
And those people will try to get tickets before anybody else does. And in that case, they probably don't need to use a service anymore. They just get actual fans. But arguably, like, the fans, the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point, most of those people can't leave the house. Like, they're probably immobile.
Right.
And the irony? Sunny Hostin, the lawyer on the panel, became the face of the show's legal nightmare. Rogan roasted that twist with a smile. The one person who should have known how dangerous words can be in a courtroom went on air and casually lit a legal fuse. It was a masterclass in exposing media hypocrisy without a single face-to-face confrontation. Just Rogan, his platform, and millions of listeners tuning in thinking, how did no one see this coming? But Rogan wasn't done. He turned the volume up even higher, not just to mock, but to make a point that hit way beyond The View. He started breaking down how mainstream shows like that have built a bubble around themselves, a self-righteous echo chamber where one ideology dominates, and anyone who questions it gets shouted over or laughed at. He pointed out how The View always brings in a token conservative woman just to yell at her. Remember Meghan McCain? Or that other blonde woman from Survivor? Rogan reminded everyone how they were treated, talked over, sidelined, humiliated on cue. This wasn't just sloppy media, it was strategic, silencing disguised as discussion. And then came the twist. Rogan brought it all back to something bigger, the shift in culture. He talked about how authoritarian tactics like suppressing free speech, mandating what people can say or think used to be something associated with the far right. But now, he said, those same tactics were being embraced by the left, under the disguise of progress. It wasn't just about one lawsuit anymore. It was about how media platforms use their power. Rogan warned that if people don't start paying attention, we'll keep living in a world where talking heads throw serious accusations around like they're just another segment before a commercial break. And as he said all this, his audience didn't just listen, they leaned in, because suddenly, this wasn't just about Charlie Kirk or Sunny Hostin. This was about who really controls the narrative and who gets destroyed when that power's abused. And that's when Rogan dropped the hammer. He looked at the sheer size of the lawsuit tone, $100 million, and made it crystal clear. This isn't your average media spat. This is devastating. That kind of money? It's not about reputations anymore. It's about survival. As Rogan put it, that's start selling popcorn franchises level of financial pain. But more than the dollar signs, he focused on what it meant. This lawsuit wasn't about ego or publicity, it was about drawing a line, saying enough is enough. Because when a show like The View can casually accuse teenagers of ties to hate groups on live TV without a single piece of real evidence, and then just shrug when called out, that's not just bad journalism, that's dangerous. And that's why Rogan stood behind Charlie Kirk, fully. Not just a nod of support, but full-on backing. He didn't say, maybe they were wrong. He said they need to be held accountable. He framed the lawsuit not as revenge, but as a wake-up call for media giants who think they can say whatever they want without consequences. And here's where Rogan really pulled the curtain back. He said it's no surprise this happened on The View. Because for years, the show has thrived on chaos, on loud voices drowning out logic, on controversy for the sake of clicks. This wasn't just a media mistake, it was a symptom of something much uglier, a system where truth takes a backseat to whatever narrative makes the best soundbite. And for Rogan, that's exactly why this lawsuit matters. Rogan didn't just hammer the recklessness, he dissected it piece by piece. He painted The View as a circus act pretending to be a news platform, a place where serious accusations fly like confetti and no one stops to ask, wait, do we have proof? He pointed out how their so-called informed discussions were often just loud, ideological rants dressed up in TV makeup. And the hypocrisy? Blinding. Here's a show that claims to stand for justice, fairness, truth, yet here they were, smearing 5,000 students based on nothing solid. No citations, no sources. Just a few half-baked comments delivered with smug confidence. Rogan compared it to someone juggling flaming swords while blindfolded. Sure, it looks bold at first, but you know disaster's just a moment away. And that's the irony he kept coming back to. Sunny Hostin wasn't just any host. She's a former federal prosecutor, someone who built her career on understanding legal boundaries. And now, she's the face of a $100 million lawsuit for possibly crossing those very same boundaries she once enforced. For Rogan, that wasn't just ironis, was deliciously ironic. A perfect, almost poetic example of what happens when media forgets that words have weight, that accusations come with consequences. That opinion doesn't shield you when you're broadcasting to millions under the banner of news. You didn't need to yell or make threats. He just held a mirror up to the chaos and let the reflection speak for itself. And what we saw was a mess. A loud, reckless, expensive mess. But Rogan didn't stop. With the irony went deeper. He started talking about how The View's recklessness could change the entire game for daytime TV. Because this lawsuit? It's not just some backroom legal squabble. It's public. It's messy. And it's loud enough to shake up an entire industry. Think about ITIF. The View gets hit with a giant legal penalty. What message does that send to every other talk show out there? That throwing out wild accusations for ratings isn't just risky, it could be financially disastrous. Rogan made it clear, this could be the moment where hot takes meet cold lawsuits. Where producers stop chasing viral clips and start running scripts past legal teams before the cameras roll. And that scares traditional media. Because the very thing that makes shows like The View so popular, the raw, unscripted drama, is the exact thing that could sink them. If this lawsuit succeeds, we might see a brand new era where daytime hosts are forced to pause, think, fact-check. Not because they want to, but because their lawyers are sweating bullets in the green room. That's the weight of this moment. Rogan didn't frame it as cancel culture. He framed it as accountability. You want to say something bold? Fine, but be ready to own it, especially if it damages people who can't defend themselves. This lawsuit isn't just about defending Charlie Kirk's event, it's about setting a legal precedent. And once that door is open, there's no telling how many shows could come crashing through it. Then Rogan zoomed out way out and hit on something even bigger. He started talking about the media power shift. Because, let's be real, years ago, a guy like Joe Rogan wouldn't have had the power to go toe-to-toe with a network like ABC. But now, the roles are flipping. Independent voices, podcasts, YouTube shows, they're no longer the underdogs. They're leading the conversation. And Rogan isn't just reacting to the news anymore. He is the news. When he takes a side, millions listen. When he mocks someone, it trends. So when he backed Charlie Kirk and torched The View, it wasn't just a personal opinion, it became a cultural moment. He basically showed the world that the traditional gatekeepers, the networks, the polished news anchors, the studio lights, they don't hold the power like they used to. One guy, in a studio with a mic, just turned a lawsuit into a movement. And Sunny Hostin? She wasn't just dealing with legal backlash, she was getting roasted in front of an audience bigger than most TV shows could dream of. That's what makes this so wild. It's not just about who's right or wrong in the lawsuit, it's about who has the influence. And for the first time, it's not the ones with big budgets or network backing, it's the ones with loyal audiences, raw opinions, and the guts to say what the mainstream won't. Rogan lit the match. The fire's already burning. But here's the thing, lawsuits like this, they're not clean wins. They're high-stakes poker games, and everyone at the table is sweating. Charlie Kirk may be going all in with $100 million on the line, but that doesn't mean it's guaranteed to play out in his favor. Legal experts are already buzzing. If he pulls it off, it could open the floodgates. Other public figures might suddenly feel empowered to take reckless media commentary to court. It could trigger a wave of lawsuits aimed at daytime talk shows, cable news panels, even podcasts. Any place where someone with a microphone decides to throw out a label without backing it up. But if Kirk loses, that's where it gets risky. A failed lawsuit could make it even harder to hold media figures accountable. It could reinforce the idea that you can say anything, drag anyone's name through the mud, and walk away without consequences as long as it's dressed up as opinion. If The View survives this without taking a real hit, it might actually embolden them. And shows like it could get even louder, even messier, believing they're legally untouchable. Rogan didn't ignore this part of the equation. He pointed out that either outcome would send shockwaves. It's not just about who wins, or losses about what message gets sent. Do we want a media environment ruled by fear of lawsuits, or one ruled by complete recklessness? This case is teetering between those two extremes, and the fallout either way could reshape how public conversation works in the internet age. We're not just watching a lawsuit, we're watching a line being drawn in real time. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more brutal, Rogan dropped the final blow. He went after The View's audience itself, not the millions watching at home, but the ones inside the studio. He explained something most people don't know. Those clapping, laughing, gasping crowd reactions. A lot of them aren't real fans. They're paid seat fillers, hired just to react on cue and make the show feel more alive. According to Rogan, real fans of The View, the ones who genuinely believe those hosts are on point, aren't even showing up. Why? Because they can't. He joked that many of them are probably stuck at home, unable to move, and watching out of habit more than loyalty. It was savage, but it landed. And that brought the whole saga full circle. Here you have a daytime show with fake audience reactions, reckless hot takes, and a history of bulldozing any guest who doesn't toe the line. And now, they're in legal hot water because they picked the wrong moment and the wrong target. The lawsuit might not just cost them money, it might cost them trust. And Rogan's takedown didn't just point fingers at expose the cracks beneath the surface. The elitism, the echo chamber, the disconnect from everyday people who just want honesty instead of another carefully scripted meltdown. If this lawsuit succeeds, it could signal the end of the old media game. If it fails, it might embolden shows like The View to go even harder, knowing no one's holding them back. Either way, the fight between free speech and accountability just got personal. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.